Hi there, I'm Kat. Let's knit together. Today, spinning. For the longest time, I would listen to other knitters rave about spinning. For me, I thought there was no point to it. My yarn stash is large enough for me to knit until I'm 99 years old, and yarn is so easy to come by. Then I realized my attitude was similar to what non-knitters say about knitting. They say things like, buying sweaters is so cheap and easy, why bother knitting? Then they don't try it, and they miss out on discovering the joy of the process. This past fall, when we went to the New York State Sheep and Wool Festival, we were surrounded by such incredible fiber, I decided to give in, buy some fiber and a spindle, and experience spinning for myself. Here's what happened. I started with icky pink fiber and this poorly made cheap drop spindle. With some assistance from spinners in my knitting group, my first attempt came out like this, an ugly mass of dreadlocks. I had a problem with two things. First, I really couldn't get this drafting thing. It was difficult to pull the fibers so the yarn wasn't so thick. And second, I discovered that the spindle I was using wasn't very stable or easy to use. But I wasn't going to give up. I read somewhere that you need to learn to spin with a really good spindle, otherwise it can become very frustrating. So I got this Bosworth spindle, which has a notch, and the whorl is weighted in such a way that it spins fairly consistently. I found that the notch helps to stabilize the yarn on the spindle. I also discovered pre-drafting, which helps to loosen the fiber for drafting during spinning. This is Roving, which I bought from the Lime and Violet Etsy store. We'll break a piece off and take the piece, split it down the center, and then split it again. Take one of these pieces and then pull slightly to loosen the fiber without breaking it off. To start spinning, we first need to attach a leader. Grab a 16-inch piece of yarn about the thickness of what you want to spin to. Tie a knot or 2 half hitches around the shaft of the spindle. Then wind the yarn in a clockwise fashion around the shaft, through the notch, and around the hook. Hold the pre-drafted fiber on the end of the leader. Begin by turning the spindle clockwise. As the twist moves up the leader into the fiber, begin drafting by pulling small amounts of fiber from the drafting zone. Keep drafting until the spindle stops or begins rotating the other way, and then wind it on clockwise. This is very physical, and it can be difficult to draft with 2 hands unless you're standing up. It takes a while to get used to, but don't give up. Well, this is what I produced in my first attempt. A fairly nice size yarn, plied with taking 2 strands and spinning together counterclockwise. I made this hat with the first 100 yards of this wool mohair blend. All along, I was thinking that this drop spindle was too heavy to make any finer yarns, so I tried smaller and smaller drop spindles and still wasn't satisfied. Until I found a ball bearing support spindle. This is an amazing achievement in spinning technology called the Royale Hare. It's a small stick, a machine brass whorl, and a ball bearing. This is how it works. Starting with your leader yarn, hold the fiber against the yarn. Give the spindle a flick of the wrist in the clockwise direction, and then you can start to draft with both hands. It's much easier than with a drop spindle because you can focus on your drafting and not worry about the spindle dropping to the floor. It's very similar to spinning on a spinning wheel. But like with the drop spindle, you still need to wind it on. I went crazy with this spindle. I spun this silk yarn, this merino silk yarn, this 3-ply yarn, and this 2-ply fingering yarn, and from that, I knitted this scarf. I was buying fiber left and right thinking I could make so many wonderful things. But to make even more, I needed to spin faster. This book, Spin to Knit by Shannon Okey, was the first in my growing library on spinning. This particular book is a great introduction to spinning techniques, as well as an interesting look at spinners, spindle manufacturers, and others in the spinning industry. When I read this, I realized how big a community of spinners there really are, probably almost as big as the knitting community. So check out this great spinning book.